on a topic very close to my heart because, as I mentioned, perhaps some of you noticed yesterday, I do have elevated blood flowing through my veins as well, somewhere in the past. But this session is about highlighting and ideating on addressing some of the challenges in a mixed-use building. The session will be moderated by an industry stalwart, Mr. Girish Dravid. Mr. Girish Dravid is the Director of Sterling Engineering Consultancy Services Private Limited, as well as the Chapter Chair for CTBUH in India. He completed his civil engineering graduation in structural engineering and post-graduation at the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. Currently, he's Director of one of the most prominent structural engineering firms in India, Sterling Engineering Consultancy Services Private Limited, as I mentioned. In a career spanning over 37 years, he's led design teams to come up with innovative structural schemes and designs of diverse projects that include tall residential buildings, commercial complexes, hotels, retail and mall convention centers, office buildings, industrial structures, sports complexes, hospitals, railway stations, and a variety of other buildings situated in major cities all over India and across other countries. Mr. Dravid is the India representative of CTBUH, or the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, which is a worldwide organization that connects all professionals concerned with planning, designing, constructing, maintaining, and all aspects of living in tall buildings across 56 countries and encourages research, studies, surveys, debates, discussions, dissemination of information, education, and acts as the world's official arbiter of measuring height of buildings under various categories. I welcome Mr. Dravid to the stage, please. And before we welcome the rest of the panel, I would also give a shout out to the session sponsor, which is Schindler India Private Limited, my former employer. Nothing could make me prouder than to welcome Mr. Vincent Pinto, Senior Vice President, Schindler India Private Limited. Schindler has been a pioneer in the tall building space. Can I call on Vincent to come on stage? Vincent is a seasoned business leader with over 21 years of experience in crafting and executing result-driven business strategies, a highly passionate, self-driven professional with rich cross-border work experience. He's worked as the global head of sales management at Schindler Group and comes with a diverse experience in service, business operations, and sales management. He's a proven track record of delivering business growth through leadership and is committed to building positive relationships with all key stakeholders. He's currently heading sales and marketing for Schindler India, a leading provider of elevator, escalator, and related services. Schindler's innovative and environmental friendly access and transit management systems make an important contribution to urban mobility in all urban societies. Welcome, Vincent. Can I please request Mr. Girish Dravid to call on the rest of the panel members, sir? You have a list, otherwise the list is right here.
So I call upon other panelists for the discussion. I would welcome Santosh Warik, who is a renowned fire expert. He has a long career in Maharashtra fire scene, and he will be great resource for information during the discussion. I welcome Prasad Patil, a security expert. Pallavi Matkari, representing Runwal Developers. She is the one whom we are going to grill as much as possible. And Vrinda Shetty from Bentel, the architect. Right, so I think without wasting any further time, we'll start talking. Is that okay? Yeah. Right. So I request all the panelists to just step forward ahead of the teapoys so that we can have a nice picture. Hello. So uh, we are going to talk predominantly about a mixed-use building which are high-rises. There are certain mixed-use projects which are spread horizontally, but that really doesn't concern us today because we are here to dwell upon aspects of a tall building, tall mixed-use building. This definitely brings more complexity into the planning of all the services that we are going to talk about, and predominantly elevators, fire, and safety. Now, today we have a mix of panelists, starting from the design architects, then a developer. Incidentally, she is also, Pallavi is also an architect by qualification, but she has now become a developer. And then Vrinda was the design architect I was talking of. Then we have Vincent Pinto, the elevator person, and I think Schindler has done most of the mixed-use projects that I know of, and he must be having tremendous experience in such projects. Am I audible properly? It's no? Okay. Then we have Prasad Patil, and the task of ensuring safety and security in a building which has different kinds of occupants. I mean, the purpose of occupying the space in the building is different. The times of occupancy, they are different. So let us hear from him how we tackle that aspect of the service. And of course, fire, which is so important in a tall building. I don't have to tell anything about it. But again, the different egresses that are required and different types of firefighting that you need to do at heights and with different kinds of, facades in place, all that we'll discuss here. So first thing I want to ask Pallavi is, as a developer, do you think getting into a mixed-use, high-rise development is economically viable? Why do developers actually do it? If there are so many, we have not discussed the problems yet, but I know all these are challenges. So whether economically it makes sense to have a high-rise mixed-use building?
So basically, the way I look at it, and I think most developers would look at it, is why do you get into the business of developing? You develop because you want to make money.
Right.
Most of the decisions of whether we want to do a mixed-use building and especially go taller comes in cities like Mumbai, where your plan, area itself is scarce. When you have to make a viable project, business-wise, you have to kind of make a little bit of leeway in terms of the cost-wise part of it. So you do take decisions depending again on where it is, whether it works, and whether it is going to make any sense from a larger perspective. For example, you would not do a mixed-use development in a place which is so far away that people are not going to go there and make it viable for you. You would probably have no choice but to do it in the town side of the city. Or for example, as far as possible, if you have a larger land, you would want to kind of go horizontal, kind of create a community. But when you have no option, vertical is the way to go.
That's right. My particular point that I wanted to make was, and even Vrinda can chip in, see, when we talk about mixed use, generally we are talking about residences, offices, some retail, maybe some component of entertainment. Now, if you look at the occupancy timings in 24 hours, residential will be predominantly occupied in the evening to early morning. Rest of the time it will be partially occupied. Offices will be predominantly occupied during daytime. Malls, maybe evening 6 to 10. Entertainment similar. Now, in the other times, what are we doing with that space? And that was my point in asking you whether it makes sense to have this complex where at any given time, most of the space is empty. It's not making money. Vrinda.
Okay, so I think in fact a mixed use development gives you an opportunity of not creating zones which are kind of, dead spaces or ghost towns at certain times. Your classic example would be the town side of Mumbai, the Ballard Estate side, where you had commercial offices. So during the week, it's like totally full of activity.
Right.
In the, let's say in the night times, when everything is off, that's when it becomes very, very, muted and there's hardly any people on the road. Or for that matters in the weekends. Now, in a way, the mixed-use development gives you an opportunity of keeping it populated, keeping it secure.
All
And I
the
think
time,
that is one of the aspects which kind of is in favor of mixed-use development.
Do developers give importance to such aspects?
Yes, they do.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, I would like to take a bit on this particular question. You asked me, what do you do of the space?
Yeah.
Like, when different users are oriented at the different timing. My question would be, where is the space left? Okay. Because any mixed-use development, especially when we speak about where there is a verticality, the tall building, they're all in the very urban centers of Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, or any of the metros or the upcoming metros we see. So the consumption is high because there is FSI available and developer want to extract the fullest of the FSI.
Exactly.
What we struggle is at a design stage, you mentioned me about 3 users. Let me consider the 3 only. I'll not bring in any fourth. The residential, commercial, and offices. Their timing is different. I agree with that. But there is clash of timing also.
Okay.
Evening when the resident comes back to his residence, the mall finds his ingress and egress both. The even office gets out. Our problem comes in where, how do you manage the circulation?
Yeah.
So, beauty of designing the master plan, like, in such mixed uses, with all this constraint, how you ensure all these circulations are managed independently without creating hassle to each other.
Correct.
And it creates some space. Okay, you actually try to find that space which we call as a breakout space or a plaza or a piazza where everybody can find a breather. That itself is a struggle for us. Some states, like, their bylaws allow us a lot of, the plaza spaces or a courtyard spaces. Bylaw allows us to give you that, where the ground coverage becomes a limited entity. But that doesn't happen everywhere. Especially in Bombay and all, that facility or luxury we do not have. So, question doesn't come that how do you make use of the space? We are best at ensuring monetizing each space, and developer ensure we do it even though if we forget also.
Right.
So they are ensuring to do that. So it is about how you respect individuals' users and
Correct.
their requirements.
Correct. In fact, that's the most important aspect we'll
Yes.
come to, but Vincent wants to say something.
So I'm basically thinking all these assumptions which we are making is based on the past so many years of data. Forgetting that something has happened in the last 2 years which has changed everything. So gone are the days then when we say residential usage is only in the morning and evening. Today work from home has changed everything. So I may be stepping out for a run in the afternoon or for a shopping in the afternoon. So that's also possible. So be cautious that our patterns have changed.
Right.
And in all the future designs, if we miss this, then we may end up designing something which is not fit for the future. And that's, I think, a need that we learn quicker from what has happened.
Vincent, that's fine, but in my mind, I thought that the idea of mixed-use development initially could have begun with an intention of a person stays in a place, his workplace is nearby, his shopping needs are catered to in a nearby place, entertainment is somewhere around. But in reality, it doesn't happen. In reality, take your RCT mall. Okay, the residential people, I mean, most of them don't have workplace in the same place, right? And they don't go shopping there. They must be going somewhere else. We don't know. The mall, visitors to mall are not necessarily staying in the apartments. So in this scenario, I mean, there is so much pressure for security people. I mean, for residences, it's a nightmare when thousands of people in evening, they visit that place, and it's a problem for security. The office where secrecy and confidentiality is observed, and if you have visitors like this. So basically, what started as a convenience place for people, it is not happening. So you have something to say about that.
Yeah, first of all, it feels good to be physically present in our discussion after a long time. As Vincent rightly said, last 2 years we've all been used to virtual discussions which really don't work, frankly. So good to be here, and thanks to Mr. Matthews for the kind invitation. So I will answer your question, but I had one point of view which I want to discuss with the developers and the architects. I'm not an architectural expert, but what I've seen from my
architecture is common sense.
Not really. Nothing is common sense, frankly. Everything has a specific expertise. But what I've noticed from my experience in India and some other countries is that mixed use, especially tall mixed use buildings, is it a phenomenon which is specific to India? Is it a phenomenon which is specific to developing countries? And I have a supplementary question. Sorry, I'm not the moderator, but I'm asking questions. Is that if that is so, and I was party to a previous discussion which was related to standards, particularly with respect to this discussion, I also did a little bit of research, and unfortunately, I did not find any standards which exist in terms of mixed-use development. Now, this mixed-use development is a terminology which has been used for the last 15, 20 years. However, we really don't see that in place. And when it concerns security, for example, and you rightly mentioned that from a residential perspective, it is a big aspect that that a resident will feel. You know, how secure is he or is she in a place which is frequented by the armed public. So from that perspective, is the architectural community or the development community working towards ensuring safe, secure, accessible spaces for mixed-use facilities? It's a question for everyone.
I would just like to answer this question, though probably this would have been a next topic also for you. See, while designing, okay, especially when we speak about the tall building, 70, 120 or up, any type, the paramount in our design, the first thing is the rescue management. How do you rescue people in terms of the fire or any kind of the disaster, the emergency? Okay, that is the paramount. From there, the design starts, then comes very relevant to the elevator industry. It is how in a short time you can make an individual reach to his destination. Okay, then comes the third, the functionality for which the whole building is being constructed. So security point of view in terms of the handling the fire safety factors, I don't think that anywhere in this industry there is a compromise. In fact, if I run through the bylaw of various states in India, almost all the states are so strict about it, there is no way leverage an architect, even a designer, even a developer can take on it.
Correct. I just want to differentiate between security and life safety. Of course, life safety, there are prevalent standards and guidelines which are in place, and every developer has to start with that, as you rightly said. But when it concerns security, and today access is such an important element. I mean, when you talk of security technology, everybody thinks of security cameras because they're a visible element, you know. But from a security consulting perspective, security cameras are the last thing that we consider. The first thing that we consider is access. How do you manage access to the facility? How do you manage access for pedestrians? how do you manage access for the visitors? And in terms of pedestrians, when you talk of residents as pedestrians or the other mixed-use users of the facility. And in terms of vehicles, how do you manage the access of the vehicles, for the vehicles of the residents as well as the non-residents? However, what I see is this access part is not considered to the extent that it should. And I'm talking from my own example, where we've got involved in mixed-use security consulting at a stage that is far beyond what we should be involved in. I mean, access has to be one of the first considerations apart from egress, emergency, that is, when you start designing a building. And what then happens is that when we get involved at a later stage, there are a lot of compromises that need to be done. And then security is constantly fighting with life safety, security is constantly fighting with accessibility, security is fighting with convenience, security is fighting with aesthetics. So these are all the parameters that we have to consider. Whereas if you decide, if the developer is sure as to what are the safe areas where access has to be restricted, and what are the not so safe areas where access does not need to be restricted. If that is clear right in the beginning, it will solve a lot of problems. Because the main threat that is that comes into play for any facility from a security perspective is unauthorized access.
Okay, but what I see in practice is completely different. Developer has his own architect, and they come up with a master plan, and most of the times, the number of elevators, the access routes, the egress staircases and passages, they're all decided by architects. That's right. When a lift consultant or a security consultant or fire consultant is not on board. Fire is another story. The whole plan, I'm sorry architects, but I'm just, this is what I observe.
We will get a chance to speak, I hope.
But most of the times, the design in terms of fire is made in order to get an NOC from fire officer, and when the whole thing is tied up in terms of FSI and maximizing the spaces and all that returns or investment, all that is done, then these consultants are called in. The elevator consultant, the security consultant, the fire consultant, if they think of him. Otherwise, there is nothing like fire consultant. MEP consultant handles that. So, and then is it not a compromise? You're already designed in absence of a consultant, and now you are saying there is no compromise?
I don't take it that way. It is, see, when very large mix use, though for initially, I would say till the concept level or schematic, when we do our layout, or there has to be something in a plate, even for a security consultant to debate. Okay, I have to create something in plate. So what it starts, an individual or a vehicle enters the property. So there is a frisking and there is a various process before he even enters the building. First, I think the architectural community must have that awareness, the importance of that.
True.
Okay. So once that awareness is there, as a first cut, when we put few lines on the board, we are conscious about it. The next comes once we cross the concept stage. Definitely the ball little goes to the developer's court now, where you need to bring in the security consultant. Now there are two cases. I will set a few class examples. Like we have a shopping mall and we have a hotel. In any mixed use, once the hotel is there, the hotel operator will not step in the property unless the security consultant is on board. So automatically there is no thought, a developer, architect, none of the other team stakeholders can give a thought. It is only their requirement and it is fulfilled. And there even architect don't have to struggle to pushing developer to bring in the consultant. Even when you have an office and the very high density office, there also this push is there because you're looking at some big brands coming, right? The Amazons and the Googles. In their term sheets, all clearly written, the security protocol has to be fulfilled. No compromise on that. The most compromised in the security consultant where you feel a large public bulk sitting is the shopping center or any public institutions or any such buildings. Where I feel it is really compromised. So there I think that awareness or that cautious mind has to be there in developers. To certain extent we can push it. Then it is all come into various parameters. But I think very big development are not compromising. Even when I speak about 1 million square foot or more, or even 0.8 million square foot retail developments, there are security consultants involved. We are doing so many in every niche and corner of India, like, those 3 lakh square foot, 4 lakh, 5 lakh square foot retail. There I say, except that the vehicle of risking is there and your metal detector board and the luggage frisking, whatever you put, nothing beyond that. No other logics or calculation is done. There definitely as a overall as an industry has to work on that.
No,
If I may just interject, and I would just like to get a perspective in terms of the question that you posed. When you are taking a conscious call of making a mixed-use building, you are also taking a conscious call that these different uses have a different set of working and a different way of working. So as a responsible developer, what we do is we make sure that the entrances of all these are separated, the vehicular as well as the pedestrian. If you try and say that, there is only one vehicular entry and then from there you expect people to move on, that's not going to happen. For example, like Vrunda mentioned earlier, you would have a residential development which would have at the peak hours people getting out from their houses, but people coming into their offices at exactly the same time. Now that is a fact of life. Nobody can, kind of debate that. And if that happens and that creates a problem, it only kind of makes your development go bad. So as a conscious call, we do take care of the fact that this does not happen. Even if it is a tall, building, you make sure that the lobbies are segregated, or you make sure that when there is a hotel and a commercial happening, hotel has multiple things happening. You would have weddings, you would have conferences, you would have people coming in and going out in their shorts and stuff like that. And then you would have a completely formal office kind of an environment. These are both commercial in a certain sense, but still it has to have its own segregation. And that's a conscious decision that needs to be taken. At the same time, I think along with it comes the fact of the security. The kind of security and the check that you would have in a residential would be a little bit different than the one that you would have in a commercial, and a little bit different in the case of a more larger public space kind of situation. So I think security is to be taken care of. And just to kind of respond to the query that you made about the security consultant and the fire consultant coming in at a very late date, I think it's not so true. There is a set of developers. I wouldn't say all, because it would be wrong to say so. There are a set of developers who are conscious enough, and they do make sure that there are spaces left for services which are not thought of for. Okay? And when that is done, at concept level, you have to kind of leave spaces as placeholders. After the concept, during the schematic design, when you have the consultants on the board, that's when the plan gets tweaked to such an extent sometimes that it goes like a 40% change from what you actually signed off. So I don't kind of completely agree that there's no space for it.
we're working with the wrong developers, obviously. So
Maybe.
So I think just to add, one is early engagement solves a lot of problem. That is well known. I don't think so we need to debate on that. Why we are not always on that path is something which we need to realize. So it's most of the time certain assumptions which we are making are based on, again, as I said, old data. Times are changing, technology is changing, and then at the end we also want to save cost. So all put together this, then we end up fixing a problem, which is absolutely fine. As engineers, we love to do that. But we forget about the experience that we let the users go through. So whether it is residential, whether it is a hotel, whether it is a retail, which you are integrating, every user has to go through a different experience and the expectation is different. And if we are able to take care of that at the very initial stage of planning, I think you can make a project really fantastic. And that doesn't mean increasing cost. It means doing it right the first time, and maybe at the end it is still cheaper. And that's where early integration of every entity who works together brings in that effect. And it's not about one company, one brand, it's about the industry. Whether it's elevator, fire, all people coming together, and that's over a period of time becoming a quality benchmark. Then you call it a code, said code or an unsaid code. That is how I think overall we can elevate the projects, the industry which we work in.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation. Now coming to fire, again, now I won't talk about compromise or anything because no one is, anyway. So coming to fire, having a stack of multi-use, different areas of different usages, how difficult it is to plan evacuation because the set of people, what I'm trying to say is the retail mall, then the offices, let's say, then the residential people. So the kind of discipline that these people have is certainly different. I mean, a person sitting in office, he may be trained in, kind of evacuation. When alarm rings, he runs away and all that. The same person, when he comes home, back home, in the evening, he may not display that kind of disciplines. I'm talking psychologically. In such a scenario, handling different sets of people in an event, how difficult it is, you think?
It is difficult from the planning point of view also. First NBC part says the segregation of risk. So occupancy wise, you should have the 4 hours fire resistance segregation between the different activities, maybe hotel, residential, or the office building and the other mall. So whatever combination you have, then the width of the staircases, depending upon what use it. If it is a mall assembly kind of a, you need minimum
Right.
2 meters width. If it is a residential, 1 meter as per Mumbai, if it is 70 meter with single staircase, they are allowing it. So it is different as per the development control rules of that city or the unified DCPR. When you talk about the evacuation, you have to really plan in advance for every activity because it is not a, you can raise alarm and evacuate the entire building. So first instruction has to be given. What are the potential risks? What may happen? So tabletop exercise, how to plan, what type of alarm will be generated. If it is a mixed occupancy, for the different occupancies, you have to segregate the alarm so that they will come to know it is for office area or it is for the residential area.
Yeah.
So these kind of protocols we have to really define. Accordingly, we have to train the occupant. We have to designate the wardens at every floor level or office level. In mixed kind of occupancy, it is not necessarily that entire building will be occupied by one user. There will be 10, 15, 20 different
True.
offices.
True.
Then it becomes very difficult. Access control will be different for different offices.
Yeah.
So once alarm is raised, so it is expected that all your access control should be open up and it gives way for the evacuation purpose. So all these things should be planned in advance and the training should be given to the all occupants, periodical training. At least once in a 3 months that training should be given and once in a 6 months that evacuation drill has to be carried out. But unfortunately, during previous sessions also I have expressed that views. We lack the safety culture in India. So we don't have any syllabus in our junior KG, senior KG or school education about electrical safety, fire safety or LPG safety or basic safety. If you go to the Japan and all that, senior and junior KG person child also knows what to do in case of earthquake. They have to go below the desk and sit over there. So such kind of things should be inculcated in our culture. Then only we will be in a position to segregate the, means minimize the risk and of the threat to the life. So that is the important thing.
Yeah, so taking from there, see, this training part is one. I mean, the architect can very well plan and developer is willing to incorporate all these safety features. But it's only the architect who knows where are the egress ways and when the security person, BMS person knows which alarm to be raised when and all that. But ultimately, it's the time, that particular instance of that event, that makes all the difference. I mean, at 6 o'clock in the evening, when the whole complex is buzzing with people, I mean, there are thousands of people in the mall who are not simply trained in evacuation procedures. There may be office people. Again, let's say there are 10 different offices, but say we have disciplined them to act together cohesively by giving them quarterly training and all that. There is another more cohesive residential group of people who know each other, so they know what to do. But ultimately, it boils down to that particular instance. Now, looking at all this, do you suggest that there has to be a group of people trained in that establishment rather than relying on the firefighting department of municipality or something, who will start that action immediately before the firefighting comes in?
Already such provision is already made in National Building Code Part 4 for the buildings above 15 meters in height and certain heights, depending upon the occupant load or mixed use. There is a requirement of fire officer or fire supervisor available 24/7 on the premises, and the fire team also for responding to any fire and other emergencies. So that is mandated by National Building Code, and as per the Maharashtra Fire Act also, Section 45 mandates that the fire officer should be appointed for the mixed use kind of activity, so that his responsibility will be to oversee whatever the fire prevention and protection systems are there, they are in good working condition. Also, in case of emergency, how he can tackle the scenario with his team, and he can guide the occupants to the ultimate safety, that is the ground level. Only thing is that he has to, every planning point of view, if it is a mixed occupancy for malls, for residential hotel and business or office buildings, the assembly point should be segregated. You cannot hold all people at one place because you don't know each other. The visitors, as you rightly said, the residential one may be knowing to each other, but the assembly point should be segregated so that we can have the count really what people there, everybody knowing to each other, or the office colleagues are know each other. So accordingly, we should segregate the assembly points in case of extreme emergency. But majority of the things, we recommend partial evacuation of the building depending upon what is the emergency. So that decision, local fire service after responding to that particular incident takes, whether we need total evacuation or partial evacuation, or we can utilize the refuge areas. The location of refuge areas, whether they are accessible with our aerial ladder platforms or not, whether that much pitching area is provided at ground level so that we can pitch the ladder for carrying out external firefighting and rescue work. All this should be think at the planning stage only.
That's right. Vrinda, I have a question for you, very simple. Suppose I want to build a building with 3 usages, retail, okay, and then residential and office. So how will you stack them? What is lower, what is middle, what is top?
Okay, first thing is residential will be little out of the box. Okay, out of the box, when I say as much as possible, you segregate from any public usage, considering the privacy required, considering the throughout occupancy, a kind of occupancy, or the awareness the occupant have it. So that will be one primary target. Then shopping center, considering where it need to be on grade. Okay, any shopping center, G+1 works the best, maximum go to 2nd level, 3rd level, F&B, entertainment will fall in. So that definitely it will only work if it is falls within that height. So anyway, NBC also defined within 30 meter you have to finish the building. The office is the only entity which can be stacked easily above the shopping center, where we can ensure their access, ingress, egress point is segregated, considering the flow of traffic and public, but easily can be accommodated, and it's the most common mixed-use entity. We have done even a residential entity coming on the mall. We have done that. In that case, ensure that they are facing on other side, never on each other side. Even like, there is a entity, in fact, we are doing for the Runwal themselves. That is where we are having a office, mall and resi. Okay, the corridor is created such a way that any of the resi activity is not disturbed by the other users. So that probably becomes the best combination. And one more thing, when we bring residential as a high rise over a point, yeah, any stacking, the residential have many cores. Like office, what happens is you have a, like, in one floor plate, you can go up to 40,000 square feet or a 50,000 square feet. Like that multiple block, that is still a very large area. But residential, when you go 4 a core or 8 a core, maximum 10 a core, that means to get a more efficient planning or a larger spread, you go on spreading it horizontally and then vertically. Then there are multiple core interfaces which comes with the lower plate. Naturally, your shopping center or whatever usage is happening in the lowermost bottom, their efficiency drops.
Right.
Efficiency drops a lot.
Correct.
So preferred is you segregate resi, rest of the things, even mall, office, hotel, they can easily be clubbed. That is not an issue.
Mall at the lowermost position.
Mall at the lower part, hotel and office on the upper stack.
So Santosh, this is a big problem for you. I mean, if mall, see, look at the fire load. Mall has clothing shops, paper shops, kitchens, everywhere, gas cylinders, everything is on the ground floor, first floor, second floor. And I believe fire rises upwards, right? And that isn't that a problem? I mean, it's very basic, childish question maybe, but from fire planning point of view, this is a big challenge for fire people.
Already we have number of such buildings in metros and mini metros having mixed occupancies like mall with office buildings and residential ones, maybe residential hotels also. So segregation of risk, already NBC's mandate that minimum 4 hours rating should be there between the different activities. Then ventilation point of view, if it is a centralized air conditioning, then you have to have the separate mechanism for means your mall, and similarly for the office. Residential, you don't expect it is a centralized AC kind of a thing, but sometimes yes, it may be. But that all services related to basic electrical ones and HVAC, plumbing, fire, that should be segregated totally out, so that you can have, if anything goes wrong, you can concentrate on that particular occupancy only. The major issue is major killer is the smoke. So if you can maintain this, means ventilation of smoke, if you can address the 80% of the problem of the firefighting. And your system should be in operation 24/7. That is a mandated thing. What we see when we carry out surprise inspections or periodical inspections of the building, the majority of the building systems are not in working condition. So that is a big challenge for us. But if plan in advance and proper ventilation is provided, I don't think it is a big challenge nowadays.
Okay, but that's quite pertinent. I was intrigued by this because there's no choice but to keep your retail on ground, right? So that's fine. That's a challenge. Now, I'll come to facade. I mean, Vrunda, I'll start with you. This is a mixed-use development, and the kind of ventilation requirements for different usages could be different. And I've seen some buildings right on this road itself, which is banquet hall below, and then there is a office building, and then there is a hotel. all in one single building, and there is no change in facade. It's the same facade going up, you know. Now, what are the challenges in deciding the facade system for a mixed-use building, which is one single stack of floors, one single building having these multiple usage? How do you tackle it?
See, especially if the mixed use comes as the horizontally spread usage in the bottom and the vertical tower sitting above that, automatically, because of the massing itself, we see the segregation happening. That helps us in tackling the facade. And facade comes the very, very simple. You said that architecture is common sense. It's actually a common sense. We have to apply our common sense. So it is, what is the function it is serving? Does it require a light which is coming from outside to inside? Yes. Office does require, a resi does require. Is it a punched window, a glassed window with the whatever, the performance glasses? Yeah, that goes above. Does mall require that kind of a light? No, not on all sides. It requires to have a presence of its entry. Various way we give. We give a entry glazings to show its presence. We give a presence of entry by the unique canopy or any kind of a features. Okay, then for the mall, the light comes from the top. I mean, what we try to give the glass or a glazing component from the roofs, the atrium skylights. So, as when it comes the usage of these two, we have never seen a conflict. I mean, that's from my practice of so many years I am seeing, there is a solid below with the limited glass or the gloss component which is coming, and then there is a transparency or the more glass component which is sitting above. Now, there are users where, like, you know, I will not say very tall building, but I will say a shopping center with the office or the hotel, which is spread a lot in a place where the height is a limitation, where height is given is within 30 or 40 meters, you have to finish your building. Then there is no tall, and such structure you can't just add on going glazing. Then probably our effort has to be not just like, you know, add another material just because the use is different. You still bring in a light into the building for the upper strata, but how you camouflage it? One thing we need to understand, there are certain users, they need to announce something to outside. Like mall have a lot of signages, which is demanded by the tenants and the revenue signages. The facade is dictated largely by how the announcement is done. But when it comes to office, the destination is fixed. You don't have to attract anybody. People will come there.
That's right.
I just want to add a little bit on that. The question that you asked about when there is a commercial at the bottom and a hotel on the top, and when it's stacked above each other, how does the glazing go in the same fashion? I think if you really look at it, the difference between the height of a commercial floor and the hotel floor is about 1 foot. At that distance, you never make it. What you do in the facade is you just optimize your panel sizing so it looks same.
Right.
Anyways, what you're seeing is never going to be measured, and it will never be felt.
Yeah.
So what happens is that transition actually happens and it's not felt.
Correct.
So if that
Maybe
answers your
my
question.
question could be irrelevant because I have seen, I mean, the building that I mentioned is just Westin I'm talking
Absolutely.
of. And also...
And that's exactly what's done there.
Yeah, I know.
So it's 4.2 at the bottom and it's 3.9 at the top, and that's only a 300 mm difference.
Absolutely.
So the principle is the same.
Principle.
So you see a big window, a small window, a big window, a small window. You just don't see that one of those windows is smaller than the rest.
Yeah,
of the
you don't
area.
realize it. And similarly, I have stayed in Jinmao building in Shanghai. So it is office below and hotel above. So it's easily doable, right?
Office and hotel, generally, their requirement of taking light in, the purpose is same. So that is very easy to camouflage and creating a graduation.
Right.
You can still create an identity and camouflage the facade.
That is right.
Only thing is, it is very much passive fire protection is very important to bridge the gap, or sealants what we call, between the glass facade and slabs. And normally, means internationally, solutions are available in the market, so you can use that. as NBC says, external facade should have the fire resistance rating, but the cost of glass is so huge, so it is economically not viable. So solution provided in NBC is you can extend your sprinklers to that glass facade,
Right.
so that in case of any fire eventuality, the bulb will take care of at least cooling the external facade.
Correct,
So that
correct.
solution is already given in NBC.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'll come to elevators in a similar thread. Okay, I forgot what was the question. It was about, I remember now. You mentioned in passing that when architects and developers first decide a plan and plan some 20 elevators, and then you get engaged after some time, when the design process has developed, progressed to some extent. So at that time, you just mentioned that solutions are possible. Now, what are the solutions? What are different solutions that you might propose to make those 20 elevators equivalent to 36 that you would generally plant? So what are those solutions? We would like to know.
Some magic? If you want 20 elevators to do the work of 36, then you have to do magic.
Yeah.
I would say that. You can solve a problem, as I say, but what are you compromising in that? You have to think, So when a building is finally made, everything is decided, the core or the shafts are left, then there is hardly anything anybody could do. There are many projects, I can tell you, as a company we had to walk off because there are solutions, but then it becomes so expensive that it's not viable. And at that point in time, if you still control cost, then you are compromising, you are shifting the problem from now to future. And it's better, at least at Schindler, we feel we put it very openly, and if not agreed, then we walk out from such project. And TAC would remember we have done that in past as a company. We learn from this, and that's where our efforts are to engage with the right stakeholders early in the stage, make them aware, and I think as this market is fairly yet to get into that stage of mixed use, high rise, real high rise, we have still a lot of learning from the other markets, which we have to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes like others and have good buildings, safer buildings, and good experience for the users.
Yeah.
Because to address your question, no, a 36 elevator need is a 36 elevator need. You cannot
Absolutely.
solve the problem with 20.
Correct. So similar question goes to security.
True.
What are there any solutions?
See, magic, as he rightly said. But, I would like to discuss a specific case study that we have worked on for the last 5-6 years, and Mr. Matthews' company has also been a part of that case study. This is concerning Surat Diamond Bose. It's not strictly a mixed-use project. It's a commercial, out-and-out commercial project. But when he mentioned about, the client telling that these are the number of elevators that you require, in terms of SDB, they did not do that. I think they onboarded some 20-odd consultants from various fields. Each of these fields is a science in itself now. It's not about intuition anymore. Life safety is a science, security is a science. I'm sure elevator management is a science in itself. So it pays to bring in those experts. So now today we have a situation in Surat Diamond Bose where we have about 150 odd swing barriers in place, about 50 full height turnstiles in place. And these numbers have been arrived at on the basis of traffic circulation and traffic numbers. They are not that I wanted those to be in place or the client wanted those to be in place. There was a collaborative discussion which happened in terms of what is the objective. They had a specific objective in terms of, a person should not take more than 5 minutes. Incidentally, SDB is probably the largest commercial space being developed in India. It's about 7 million square feet. It is larger than the Apple spaceship headquarters in Cupertino, which has come up. So the client was very specific in terms of what they wanted, that a person who's entering the swing barrier or the facility should reach his particular office or her particular office within 5 minutes. I think that was the
Brief given.
brief
Yeah.
which was given, and all services had to kind of follow that brief and come up with numbers related to elevators, numbers related to access control devices, so that is achieved at the same time, not compromising on either security or safety. I think that kind of clarity definitely helps. I want to also go back to one of the discussions related to what Vrinda said about knowledge with the architect community in terms of all these services. Definitely increasing, no doubt, much better than what it was earlier. But one thing that has to be kept in mind is technology in terms of security and in terms of life safety has evolved immensely. One is that nothing is impossible now in terms of security. If there is a particular requirement that can be met, we're not like 10 years ago where we would think about whether some requirement can be met because everything is IP. Everything is internet protocol. So so technology is evolving. If the knowledge of that technology is available with the architects firsthand and developers firsthand, and I've actually interacted with someone from Runwal who had that knowledge, which is very good. Secondly, coming back to the point of security in design, another specific example is that you would have developers which are developing 1 million square feet of space, but when it comes to a security operations center, they're not willing to give 100 square meters. Even 100 square meters is not available because the space needs to be monetized. So I think that is a very, very important requirement. If there's a facility coming up with 1 million square feet of space, there would be at any given point of time 10,000-15,000 people in the building, which means that the security operations center is the heart of the entire facility. And unfortunately, we don't have an NBC in terms of security. When Mr. Warwick can always say that, NBC says this, so this has to be done. Unfortunately, in terms of security, it's not like that. So we have to fight with customers sometimes. And today, the requirement is not one security operations center, but 2 security operations centers, because there's got to be some redundancy. If one SOC fails, there has to be something else which has to take over. So there is a certain space requirement that has to be kept in mind. When you talk of, for example, access control, you start with boom barriers, bollards, tire killers, under-vehicle scanning systems, full-height turnstiles, X-ray baggage scanners, DFMDs. Now, all those require physical space. All those will lead to a little bit of queuing, whether it's related to pedestrians or whether it's related to vehicles. So that kind of space consideration also has to be kept in mind. And that's what I meant earlier, building security or all these factors into the design stage, so that at a later date, from a security perspective, a crowd is a security risk. So minimizing queuing is a big agenda for security consultants. So if some thought can be put into place in terms of availability of space and minimizing queuing at the design stage itself, that will be very good.
You are hoping against hopes, because they don't even give me 1 meter by 1 meter column.
Oh, that we will not.
Where is 1,000 square
Basement.
meters?
That's
Yeah,
a carpet
actually,
area.
Security operations center, the favorite space is the basement,
Yeah, it's the best.
which should be the last space where a security operations center should be.
That is right.
In fact, Girish, we would be more happy to give him security space than give you the
Than a
column
column.
space, because we know you can crunch it.
Fine, don't call me for the next project. You don't need my columns. You wanted to say something?
I wanted to say apply the same magic what you wanted 36 to 20.
Yeah,
Yeah, so take half the column.
right. By the way, elevator shaft doesn't come into FSI even, and they don't want to give you that space.
And that brings me to another topic. That means it's not only about how many shafts are you leaving, it's also about where are you leaving it.
Right.
Just because there is a free space and you put a shaft on the right and on the left, it doesn't help.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes also not 36 to 36, it's also about planning and well thought through plan which will help. And like you were saying, a residential has a different entry, So everything has to be going hand in hand.
Right, right.
In fact, nowadays, a lot of times when we are doing the designs or checking the designs for that matter, the first instant reaction that we have is thankfully most of the elevator guys have put some software or the other on the net where you can actually go and see the sizing
Right.
that is required. It also tells you what is the number of people. You have some kind of a background in terms of, okay, for a similar building, how many elevators did you put for how many people?
Right.
And that gives you at least a broad idea of where you're at. So at least at 80%, 85% mark, you're right there.
Right.
It's only that last bit and the last leg where it becomes extremely important to kind of, sit with them and understand whether we need to do some modification.
Yeah.
The simplest example being the selection of an elevator from a 2.5 meter per second to a 3 meter or 3.5. That itself puts a little difference in the pit sizes or the overhead sizes and stuff like that. And I think that is something, finally, at the end of it, any project is a collaborative effort.
I think
So
such
it just
small
comes
challenges
together.
can be handled. There are systems like destination calling or like what you said. Small, 20 can definitely become 22, 23, if not 36. So I think that much challenge they will give. Similarly, for you people also, as you said, there are some new gadgets and everything is IP. So some
For
kind of
example,
enhancement.
elevator management and access control,
Yeah.
elevator management and cameras are very easily integrable nowadays. And we mentioned to a lot of customers, especially in mixed-use facilities, that elevator management and cameras need to be integrated because the camera in the elevator needs to tell the security operations center at which stop it is stopping,
That's right.
which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
We do a lot of jugaad. So in our society, there are numbers which are marked on the floor, which is in the view of the camera
Okay.
to tell you,
Yeah.
because it's a basic system, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But nowadays, elevator management is again on IP as well, so it can tell you exactly which floor the
No,
elevator
this
stopped on.
integration, Prasad, is, it's so thorough nowadays. Fire, elevators, security,
BMS,
structure, everything is integrated. You cannot think of just designing an elevator just by itself. There has to be a fire consideration, there has to be everything. Similarly, fire. It has to have structural integration. So, all things,
So
are integrated
from an
nowadays.
architectural perspective
Yeah.
in mixed-use facilities, I think this seamlessness of technology
That's right.
is something that has to be a part of the design, so that all these various systems can sit on one platform,
Yeah.
which is of benefit to the developer as
That's
well.
right.
And I think Vrinda mentioned about Amazon and Google. They have their own security standards. So if you are able to present that seamlessness right up front, it is definitely of the benefit to the facility as well.
Somehow I'm not liking the trend of conversation. We are tending to agree with each other. So now I will throw last 10 because it's already 5:40, and if some people have questions, we should answer them. So last question. This mixed use that we have talked and so many things we discussed, and we left MEP out of the discussion because there is no MEP guy here. But look at the problems that vertical mixed use development is facing in terms of fire, security, elevator, structure, because grids will change, and I will ask for transfer of girders and so many things. The MEP will have transfer of shafts and services, so you need a service floor. So all these things make this building, and this question is especially for you, and you architect assist you in developing that plan. But spending so much, again I'm coming back to the first question, spending so much on a high-rise mixed-use building, does it make sense? Because you're adding cost to the structure. If you would have, for the same FSI, if you had built one single residential building, typical floors, it would have been much, much cheaper, more rewarding. So what makes you so passionate about building mixed-use buildings?
So I think that question has a multifold answer, but I'm just going to try and do it in two. One part of the the answer is this, that if you look at the mall or the commercial, the kind of grid sizes that you work with are similar. If you stack a hotel on top of it, it still works. So you don't have to do transfer girders. Personally, I'm not very in favor of transfer girders. But when it comes to residential, where your room sizes are not as large or they fit into the grid, that is when the problem may arise. But if you are going to anyway stack them up, it is easier or it is more prudent to check whether you can actually have a grid size which works for all. I think that is where the answer lies. In that case, I'm sure the structural cost of putting TGs and stuff like that is kind of reduced. On the other hand, like you mentioned, having a FSI and taking it all the way up and using it up entirely in one residential or one use building. The difference is this, that in a residential building, as you go taller and taller, it just becomes expensive and expensive. But it doesn't yield you that much money. Because for example, if I told you I'm selling you an apartment at a particular floor, and then I said, well, for consuming my FSI, I'm going 79th floor, and you have to pay me thrice the money. You're just going to say no. And then it doesn't make any business sense. Also for using FSI, the same amount of plot area can let me use much more FSI if I'm using a commercial or a retail space than a residential, because residential requires 4 sides of open.
Okay, so this is
and all
built in
that.
bylaws, right?
Yeah. No, not just bylaws, it's also practicality and logic again.
Okay. Fine. Vrinda, any take?
Yeah, there is one interesting observation we have done, like, when working with the way, it's not just a big time developer. We have other set developers also who are maybe the individual development owner, not the multiple. And there are some institutional developments also. First thing is the type of mixed use combinations what we make. At least nowadays we push it, knowing our experience with other developments. It's not my field of expertise, but I'm telling by experience. We push them to segregate the residential, okay? Not just because as a planning it favors or structurally it benefits, or not just about the cost. It's about the fact that most of the developments are also get hived off the commercial developments. After, when the investor, the developer realizes his return after certain years, and the valuation goes high, he thinks of hiving off his commercial, which are the lease entities. But the sale entities, it's not possible to hive off. When you club the mixed uses, when you bring in the sale and the lease entities together, the larger investment withdraw. So that is one reason where it goes. Another is any development, commercial development, whether shopping center or the offices, they generally become catalyzer in the development of the whole area. Okay, it is not just about that development being there. The what investment a developer does on that development is going to bring back, very example is our Mindspace area. Okay, the Mindspace, I remember in 2003-4, between 2003 to 6, there was an Inorbit Mall and some of the commercial entities started. I don't think that Inorbit Mall, that time when they were expecting that kind of a return. It was a first shot. In fact, it was the first mall in India in such a big scale, organized retail which was coming. That was probably a pitch what he did to increase the valuation of the whole area. What development we have seen in all over Malad, that area of the Malad, the credit goes to that Mindspace development. I think, and this is one in Bombay, but similar development we are seeing in the towns like Ranchi. Trust me, we are doing such developments where there is a mall and hotel. I can't say offices everywhere, but mall and hotel, such kind of mixed uses which are coming within 10 lakh square feet developments. In places in Kerala, you might not even heard Manarkad, Kunnamkulam, I may not be right in my pronunciation also, and Calicut and some Perinthal. These are all hospital districts, and such developments are happening. The only idea is the next few years you will find a residential happening, the valuation going up. This is happening in Kerala, this is happening in Punjab, all over Punjab, in Mohali, Jalandhar, Ranchi. So we are now, India is now beyond its metros. It's not just a metro. It may not be, the buildings may not be as tall as 90, 120 or whatever, but urban, still we are going in our tall way.
That's right.
That way.
That's right. Yeah, very nice, very nice. So I think I'll stop here. Very nice, interesting discussion. And I had some more points, but I'll have to stop. There are some questions? Oh, 3. Okay, start one by one. Answer frankly. Eh?
Before Mr. Suresh goes, I have to ask my question before.
Absolutely.
That's my strategy.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I think in my college days, we used to go to watch Die Hard to understand the MEP shaft and elevators and things like that and the security system. I just have first question to you from the security perspective. As you rightly said that there are a lot of codes available as far as the fire is concerned, as far as the elevators are concerned. But what is a guideline I should have from the user perspective that how I should map my security as per the user? So is there any guide available to me? Is there any work ongoing on this particular subject?
Sure. Google.
Other than the Google?
Our biggest competitor in security consultancy is Google. So, unfortunately, no. Ravi has been privy to something that we've tried to do as security consultants. We have an association called Security Consultants Association, SECONA, which we established 7 years ago. And it's a very niche community, security consultancy. In fact, there are very few companies like us which focus only on physical aspects of security technology.
I just want to cut you short here because there are several security systems which are globally available. I mean, like
Sure.
the Israeli security is something which is not with the equipment.
Sure.
They have something other technology.
Sure.
So I see a lot of gadgets, but there are several ways by which the security can be looked
Absolutely.
upon.
So-
and then there has to be guideline what developer should opt out for, because we are just talking about adding a space or adding a gadget. But
Correct.
sometimes there could be some kind of means and ways which could be a guideline by which the security can be established. So what you have to say about it?
Sure. So when we talk of guidelines, they're not gadget or technology specific. They are requirement specific. And that is what we also as consultants believe. Like in IT, there has to be a proper requirement analysis. In security, there has to be a proper risk analysis. So in fact, every security consultant has a framework. We have a framework called TRAVA, which is threats, risks, and vulnerability analysis. So we undertake that TRAVA every time we undertake a security consultancy assignment. And the recommendations in terms of what mechanisms or countermeasures, as we say in security consultancy, to follow, it has to be a concomitant of the TRAVA analysis. So unfortunately, like NBC, there is no guideline today in India as to what, and so that is where a lot of developers also and architects also kind of feel confused, because security cameras, for example, there are cameras which are available for 3,000 rupees, there are cameras which are available for 30,000 rupees.
Correct.
So when budgets are made, 3,000 rupees is considered,
Absolutely.
but when implementation is done, they want a 30,000 rupee kind of value. So, but that is a challenge. So we have to work together with developers and architects and to understand what is their perspective in terms of risk.
Yeah, but it has to have some kind of analytical, I mean, there are so many things which are now available. I mean, I know if I go with the kind of a speed of the elevator or size of the shaft, what
Sure.
kind of an impact it is going to have. So if we have that kind of a metering or kind of a monitoring, then it would be easier for everyone to bite the bullet.
Sure. For example, I mean, there are benchmarks that we also have, thumb rules. If you talk of cameras, we say that one camera per 100 square meters is the minimum requirement in terms of what a facility should have for 100% public area coverage. So in mixed use facilities, for example, we ensure that all the public areas are 100% covered in terms of cameras. So one camera per 100 square meters is the approximate value. In terms of access control devices, now there is analysis that can be done in terms of the numbers of access control devices. But unfortunately, there is no analytical tool which can tell you whether a swing barrier has to be used or a flap barrier has to be used. Both of them can give you 15 or 20 persons per minute, or say 25 persons per minute. But then that comes to aesthetics as to what is better looking in terms of the entry. When it comes to foolproof security, we always recommend full eye turnstiles. So you're reducing the number of people that can enter per minute, but it becomes foolproof security. So there are various options. That's where consultants are required. But there is a bit of science in terms of understanding as to what, where, and how much to be used. There has to be a limit. See, you can't invest hundreds of millions of dollars in security. We also understand that. As long as the basic security risk is minimized, that should be okay. So there is a fine tuning, there is a balance, there is optimization which happens in conversation with the customers.
Thank you. Now I have next question for Pallavi, and this is a question from an architect. Challenges in a mixed-use building, but architect faces the challenges of design change while the project is going on. And later on, whether it is occupied, again, there could be a chances of design change. That time, what is your challenge? Whether going back to the architect or looking at so many services and several aspects of change in the design. In short, what I'm trying to ask is that right now, India is seeing a lot of high-rise development. Post-occupancy, there is a lot of failure which is also happening with these mixed use. And there we have to think about reusing these spaces. So how you look at this, and all of you look at this particular future of Mumbai city, when the buildings will come to recycle and reuse, or probably retrofitting. Probably it's your lease model. Mixed use will be in that particular fashion. How you would look at it, all of you.
So basically, if you ask me this question, I think one of the most important things to consider is the fact that yes, because we have so much of dynamism in our rules and we have so much of dynamism in our requirements and so on and so forth, I think change is something that all of us are brought up to accept. We do accept that there will be a change. Of course, you can't say that, I have to keep my construction on and still make this building from a commercial to a residential completely without spending any time on it. That doesn't work, to be very honest. And I think you'd require to take that little bit of time to resolve the problem. Because something which is a much larger floor plate, when you have to reduce it, you need to do it intelligently and understand how you would do it and why you would do it. On the other hand, there is also a possibility of, let's say, a commercial building. Take the example of the Dreams Mall, for example. They made a retail mall. Well, it was made in a place in which it was not working. Now they're trying to put a hospital on top of it. It is a nightmare, to be honest. It takes a huge amount of reworking. You have to put your thought to it, saying, yes, I'm not going to be able to retrofit in the as-is condition. I have to do something different. I have to add something. I have to subtract something to make it work for another use. You can't say two different uses have to work exactly the same way, because then you wouldn't have so many different typologies of buildings to begin with. As far as the new buildings which will come up and will eventually get into a mode of having to be reused, repurposed for that matter, will have to take this into consideration. You would have to step back. You would have to say, okay, I can't take it and use it as is. I have to step back, rework it in its best sense, and then take a call. That call may as well be, I have to break it. Okay? But you have to be able to take that call basis all the set of informations and take an informed call of what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing.
Maybe I can just add here. Of course, plans change, Even if you keep the same usage, I give an example here. You may have designed a building for a single tenant commercial, but now because it's change in times, it's not selling, and you decide now multi-tenant. This will also have an impact on the original traffic conditions. Now, it goes back to the first stage. Have you planned with the lowest limit instead of 3620 and then hoped for the best and now you are in a big mess? Or you have planned with optimum higher level and then you are already ready for such a change. So that will also determine how successful you end up giving experience to your customers.
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I come from a city of achievers because we have a secretariat building which was converted to a hospital from Chennai. Talking about that. But Anuja asked a question. I want to delve on the same thing. I want Pallavi and Vishali to answer. When a developer and plans for a project, is there a brief that he gives the architect on what they are expecting? Because the aspiration of the developer has to be met. And if probably there is no brief, then the gap between aspirations and what is finally achieved could be enormous. Similarly, does the architect identify consultants to support them in such an initiative based on a brief that you receive from the developer? And do you in turn transfer that brief into a larger brief requesting for, you know, the kind of facility that you ideally want to deliver to the developer? That's my point.
So what one would do in the beginning of a project is, if you have a land that you have bought, you would take that land, you would try and understand the market survey of what is required on that particular land, which is actually the very first step of developing anything. At that point, you do take a conscious call. There may not be a certain thing which is available in that particular area, and you may take a call that I want to build, let's say, a hospital, or I want to build, let's say, a mall. You can always step back, even at the schematic design stage or at the design development stage, and say, oops, I made a mistake. Probably I worked for 9 months. I made a decision basis what happened in the market at that given time. Things have changed. It's better to take that step back and get rid of that whole baggage of I have spent 9 months, so let me just build this because I build this forever. Okay? It makes better sense to kind of step back and do a different project, do a different brief, and there's nothing wrong in course correcting. Okay? So yes, we give a brief. We say, this is the kind of facility. Even if it's a mixed use, we would go back and say, this is the broad leasable area that I'm gunning for. This is the broad kind of apartments I'm gunning for. This is the broad kind of mix that I'm thinking of. If you have something else, come back. So there are times when the architect would come back and say, okay, fine, you had a mix of, let's say, X amount of hotel, Y amount of offices, and Z amount of retail, and so much of residential. It seems with the kind of plot that you have that we would prefer that you keep this only this much and not that much. Or it seems with our understanding of the market from other projects that we are doing in the vicinity that you need to go up on this side. And that also changes your brief. It's not like it's not like a hard and fast that you have to stick to your guns and say, okay, this is, I decided it once and therefore I'll never change it. You've got to kind of keep waiting at every stage and say, okay, let me check whether I'm on the right track or not. That's, I think, essential, irrespective of whether it's a service or whether it's the project.
No, not only project, it's a life lesson. Even in our personal lives, we should follow this advice.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pallavi.
I think.
Any more questions?
Yeah. I'll just take this.
Vrinda.
Yeah. From whatever Pallavi said, that's very true in whatever the flow she mentioned. That's very true to the developers who are into many developments, like, whether Runwal, DLFs, or from South also, if I say there is Prestige, Brigade, where they have set of team of architects, the leasing, their sales team. where the brief is very clear. Okay, sales team would have done already their requirement of the market. Leasing team has a clear clarity on what do they want for their shopping center, and sales team for the resi, and everything is clear. Whatever changes may happen, because there is added FSI or whatever such brief change in terms of the property potential, okay, then the changes happen. But we deal with completely another sector which is there other than these key developers, where there is zero brief. They consider, like, the architect is everything. So first they come to us, and then they expect us to even answer whether we can build a hotel here. Like, property potential, yeah, I can clearly answer, yes, you can. That hotel will work, I am not an expert. I am not an expert to say the hotel will work in place like, some place like Manarkad. From all the geographical analysis I said them, it will not work. Okay, but I am not an expert. You must take an expert opinion. We definitely direct them. We can't take the ownership of something which we are not expert. Regarding shopping center, as Bentel, we have done many shopping center, very easy for us to even give them 50% feedback, but we can't guarantee them 100%. For that, whether the PVR will bring in 5 screens or a 10 screen in that area, that PVR can say better. So somebody has to guide them, is the leasing consultant, or what do we call as a development consultant. There are many development consultants are there in the market. For amateur developers, we definitely guide them before taking call in terms of your product mix. Okay. See, residential is little easy for them, because residential, I think, if he is a one-time developer, the second project, very easy for him to grasp what that place needs. But beyond residential, whether office or the hotel or thing, it is not something by your naked eye you can judge. It requires an analysis. And for the metros, analysis may be ready available in Google, but not for the beyond tier 2 cities. Analysis is not available. Everything depends on where the project is located, whether in a city or whether in a highway or in a bypass, whatever. The various strategies there to decide the outcome of the revenue outcome from the property. So I think as an architect, we can guide them, and we definitely do that, to go to developing consultants or the hospitality consultant, and the various expertise are sitting in the market. We challenge them. And I suggest we shouldn't even take that onus on us, because our expertise is limited in designing and making a full potential of the property in terms of design, and whatever other deliverables and accommodating other services to make that property function. But the nature of the property, whether it will bring in your return, whether it will guarantee your return in so many years, yeah, it's not architect who should be guiding. It has to be an expert. Yeah, it has to be an expert.
Mr. Suresh, last question.
Yeah, very briefly. I'll have two. Maybe all of you answered. You design a building for various mixed use coming, be it the mall, offices, hotel and residence coming, whatever. And of course, being a structural engineer, you'll have different types of loading coming for a residential floor. If you got to have an office floor, as well as you might put a PT slab for large one for other requirement, etc. So when the use makes changes to a different type of structural issues come because of that heights, etc. Do you have a problem to deal with that particular different loadings coming, and it doesn't happen? The reason is trying to give an example of what he told of one of the secretariat building completed with the best German architects, L&T building it, finally becoming a hospital there. I have a case of other case where you thought it was going to be a hostel, they thought of making it a hotel, they thought of making it a hospital, and finally it became the Secretariat of Delhi. Today, Secretariat of Delhi is a building which was done during the Games Village time period as a hostel for sportsmen. How you get convert there? So possibility of things will happen on that. So how do you look at it from a structural point of view? You would rather take a more or less not the fine definition of the residential loading, commercial loading, other loading, and do mixed one, or how will you do that?
It's very difficult to design a building with such kind of flexibility. I mean,
Yeah, because in mixed use will come, sir.
no, yeah. But I need a definite brief that the first 3 floors are retail, then next floors are office, then
Yeah.
10 floors are. then I can design an optimum building.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But if they want, I have designed buildings where the client told me that there is a possibility of changing the usage. And then I told him that, oh yeah, then there will be about 25% structural cost premium on this. He agreed and we did that.
Okay.
So it all depends on the vision of the developer. If they are sure that the retail is going to be converted into hospital, yes, there is a change in loading.
Loading is,
there is a change in loading. And retrofitting slabs and beams and columns at a later date, when hospital is going to open in 3 months' time, it's not possible.
Impossible.
So if developers keep that vision, invest about 20-25% right now, the building can see in many number of changes over its design life of 50 years.
Correct.
And they can reap money. But that vision has to be there. And structural cost is nothing.
Because India does not have occupant loading being posted for different type. Otherwise, many of the international buildings, there is an occupant load. This is for this load of 400 kg per, you don't have that.
And it's not only loading, there are so many other
issues.
Technical issues. I cannot speak about them, like time period and stiffness change and all that.
Related question.
Nobody would listen
I
to
think
me.
I'm really sorry. They're blowing the whistle. I don't want to be herded out of the hall.
I'm talking of parking. When you have parking requirement of different nature for the mall requirement, office space and residential, and more so with EV coming into the picture there, where are you going to put each one of them? First of all, EV do not want to mix with the other parking. So isn't that a concern in a larger one?
It's concern, but Pallavi has come back to me on many occasions to do so much retrofitting in malls.
Or you make separate parking for
So
each
you
of
can't
them.
say anything about
It's
anything.
possible if you have money to retrofit, anything is possible.
Okay.
Okay, I bring this conversation to end, and I must say this was like a fireside chat. You didn't wait for my questions as such, and I'm proud of my entire panel. They have exceeded their performance beyond expectation. Thank you individually, every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dravid. And I couldn't thank the panelists enough for all their active participation and the wisdom that they imparted. If you would just kindly stand by for a small conference souvenir. Mr. Girish Dravid. Mr. Santosh Varik. Mr. Prasad Patil. Ms. Pallavi Matkari. Ms. Vrinda Shetty. And of course our session sponsor,
I just
Schindler India
wanted to
Private
say-
Limited, Vincent Pinto.
टैक है तो मुमकिन है.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you very much to all the audience members for very active participation. Have a good evening and we'll see you tomorrow.